That was great. Thanks, Jay. Also, thanks to our platinum sponsor, Microsoft, gold sponsor, Red Hat Marketplace, and silver sponsor, Google Cloud, for sponsoring this event. Next up, we have Brady Lenahan, VP of Alliances and Ecosystem with Cloud Zero, discussing how startups are leveraging cloud marketplaces to grow their business.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me all right? I just realized I don't think everyone else can talk, so I will take that as a yes. Thank you for having me today. I lead our alliances team at Cloud Zero, and I'll be walking you through as a startup from our first go-to-market employee to now having about 40 employees, how Tackle and marketplaces have helped accelerate our growth. So we'll be starting with a little bit about our story, a little bit about Cloud Zero, and our strategy when we adopted Marketplace. Then getting into some of the benefits, really the growth accelerators, and then finishing out before some Q&A with lessons learned, right? A few things that I think we did well, and a few things that if I could go back and start from day one again, I might do a little bit differently. So Cloud Zero, right? Said we're a startup. That means we're about a 40-person VC-backed company, Series A, soon to be Series B. I was our first go-to-market hire, so I'm running our alliances team right now. But I came on board when we had 0 customers, 0 revenue, and the beginning ideas of a product. So for those of you who've been in that situation, it's always a fun ride, and we're focused on the AWS ecosystem. That's where we started. We're starting to expand a little bit, but that's really been our bread and butter. And that's not only been from a partnership standpoint, but also from a product standpoint. So I won't go into a Cloud Zero commercial right now, but the thing that we do that made the AWS ecosystem a natural fit was we help SaaS companies who are building on cloud understand their cost visibility. What's my cost per customer? What's my cost per transaction so that you can price and package a SaaS application more effectively? So we were really ingrained from a product standpoint with AWS. And, I came in and was expected to sign up some customers and as a small fish in a big pond was looking for areas to get leverage. And one of the areas we looked and had success was Marketplace. And, AWS recommended we work with Tackle back in 2019, and it's been a great partnership ever since. We got listed and we launched a Marketplace first strategy. Our first ever deal went through Marketplace. To date, over 95% of our revenue has gone through Marketplace. And, the benefits have really been great. And I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on how we got these benefits and how it's impacted our org. But today, over 40% of our leads so far this year have been generated from AWS, right? Not all of that is attributable to Marketplace, but it's been a big leverage point for us in how we've been able to outperform other companies of our size by leaning in with that group. We've also deferred. I said, we're about a 40-person company right now. We don't have an in-house finance person, right? And our invoicing and legal work is exceptionally low. And I'm going to go through some of those, the ways that we've done that on the next slide as well. So touching on the growth accelerators, right? I've broken this down into 3 categories. The first is gaining additional leverage with the cloud service providers. In our case, that's been AWS to date. But from friends that work more in the Azure or GCP ecosystem, I think a lot of this still holds true, right? So at the rep level, we've seen that there are often marketplace sales incentives, ways that the individual sellers with AWS will hit soft goals that help them get promoted, or hard goals that get them a bigger commission check if they're able to run a SaaS offering through Marketplace, right? So when we talk to the AMs at AWS and the reputation we've built that we put everything through Marketplace, that's a big plus in our book. And that's the reason that, they'll introduce us to other reps, they'll introduce us to their team leaders, things of that nature, right? Then beyond the individual reps, from a more programmatic perspective, we've had a lot of success working with the marketplace product teams themselves to do demand gen campaigns, call downs, worldwide prospecting days, getting sponsored into that. And then we've also been able to, through those demand gen campaigns, if we generate opportunities, often the marketplace team will provide credits so that when a customer says, oh, that's great, but can we get an additional discount from you, Cloud Zero? You can say, well, we're at our discount maximum, but because we're putting this through marketplace, we're going to provide you with, $5,000 of credits to offset the purchase. And, that helps us from getting pressured too much to eat into our margin, but also is a really good show of faith for the customers, which I'll touch on in a second. And then we've also done some great brand building, right? Whether it's just investing in our listing on Marketplace on the website, banner ads that they've done for us, webinars we've done with the team. There's just so much you can do when you really lean in with the AWS Marketplace team and with Tackle. Honestly, we've gotten a lot of great brand building through them and their parties and things like this. So that's the leverage. The next one is reduce commercial friction, right? So a lot of you have probably seen this in early marketplace wins, but I still remember it was one of our first deals that we did. And, we had a manager of cloud ops telling us that he was going to get a $75K deal done without any approvals. And I was rightfully so kind of skeptical, right? We all know like the guy who says he's the economic buyer isn't really the economic buyer. Sure enough, he clicked the button and we had the deal. And that was when I realized that when you're targeting an existing cloud budget and the person who oversees that cloud might not have to be a VP or a director, especially, I mean, we're a startup, right? So when we were under six figures on a lot of these deals, we were able to move things through where our champion was our economic buyer and the budget was already approved because they had an EDP with AWS. So that's been great. There are times where we have a more thorough review, right? And where we've been able to streamline that process is through the standard contract, right? And again, I live in the AWS world. They have the standard marketplace EULA. It's a contract that was built with the input of hundreds of AWS customers. And when we send it over to our prospects, oftentimes we'll have no changes that come back, right? If they bought through Marketplace before, they've probably reviewed it. There's a simple amendment form. And in the case where the customer wants to do a more thorough procurement process, what we do is we put an order schedule and signature box on that amendment form. That way you can still send it out through DocuSign. You can do Coupa, whatever the customer wants to do. And then you just load that right up into Marketplace and you invoice that way. So by having those two options, sort of the really straightforward marketplace easy way and take the marketplace contract and do a more traditional procurement process, we've been able to get our legal and financial costs to be almost zero for transactions. The last piece is I talked about how this is great working with the cloud providers, how it helps startups like Cloud Zero internally. The third piece is that customers actually like it, right? Oftentimes they have an EDP. They want to burn that down. They love when we can give them extra credits. That's a discount to them. And anytime you can simplify the process and your champion doesn't have to go add something to legal's backlog, that's a win too. So we've seen across the board that Marketplace has been a growth accelerator. And we've learned some lessons along the way. The first one is I think you want to have top-down buy-in because it is a little different than a traditional, a traditional process, right? So all the way up to our board, they really understand what we're doing with Marketplace. And one of the conversations that we wanted to be really transparent about was there is a fee, right? It can be 5%, 8%, whatever it is to the cloud service provider to transact through Marketplace. So when you're reporting ARR, there's a gross versus net conversation. And, I've seen companies do it both ways. I personally prefer gross. It makes it easier to report on in Salesforce and in some of the sales compensation conversations we're going to have in a second. I think it's just more straightforward. But then you got to figure out, does that go into CAC? Does that go into margin? As long as everyone's aligned, I think it's great. But what you want to avoid, and this happened to me once or twice, was the sales guys reporting on the gross numbers, but the board is tracking on the net numbers. And then there's a 7% variance and somebody has to explain for it at the end of the quarter. So my advice is don't let that happen. The second thing is, how do you make sure that that's looked at as a positive, right? If we're going to give up 7, 8% to the cloud service provider, why are we doing that? And luckily, we've done a really good job of educating our executives at Cloud Zero from the beginning. And it comes back to the fact that we're getting 40% of our leads from the cloud service provider, right? And we're seeing that even leads we're not getting, we're closing faster. So making sure that they both understand the fee that you're paying, but look at it as we're getting ROI on this. This isn't a cost, right? If we were to take this out of marketplace, what's all the things that we would lose? So we've been really intentional in educating our executive team and making sure we have that alignment. Same goes with the sales team, right? I highly recommend paying on gross value so that there's no marketplace conflict. And it's really important to educate them on how marketplace is helping them win in deals, because they're the ones that are boots on the ground. They're talking to the AMs at the cloud service providers. They're the ones educating some customers that maybe haven't done this before, why it's a better path forward. It's really important that your sales teams are on board, but also that they're advocates. And then the last piece is, remove alliance bottlenecks early. This is one that I did really badly, right? So there are things like the ACE portal, where that's Amazon's, where you share leads. I would have gone back and I would have had everyone sharing their own leads, 2 years before I did. Same thing with creating private offers, right? So Tackle makes it really easy. All of our sellers now have a login, which actually was huge, that it got us around some security concerns that our CISO had when I said, I just don't have time in my day to create all the private offers. Makes it really easy to track everything. But I would have had the reps creating private offers from day one. It's easy when it's like, oh, it's only 3, it's only 5, it's only 10. Quickly, if your business is doing what you hope it's doing, you get to the point where one person owning that is just untenable. So doing a quick time check, I stayed on track. So we got 3 minutes left here. Hopefully that was helpful for people. If anyone has questions, happy to answer. I think there's a chat feature, although I can't see the chat feature with this shared. So why don't I drop out of sharing mode and see if there are any questions? I see. Is there a reference or playbook for startups? Honestly, I got a lot of my playbook from the team at Tackle. I'm not just saying that because I'm on their webinar, but I was pinging Don at one point, like, probably every week, saying, hey, what happens with this? What happens with that? So I think they can be a really good resource there. And then, our marketplace team from AWS has also been a great resource, right? We worked with our PDM to figure out who on marketplace could help us do some interesting things. And I think between Tackle and your primary cloud service provider, you'll be able to find the resources. Recording, I know it is being recorded, so I think you can probably get a recording. Pros and cons. Okay, quickly, pros and cons. I think the only con for us has been you do have a small fee that you pay. For us, it's to AWS. The pros have far outweighed the cons. The pros have been that it's been, at one point it was a real differentiator. I think now a lot more companies are doing it, and it's almost become an expectation of customers. But it really helps us drive a better relationship with the Amazon sales teams. Our customers like it, and it reduces the amount of money that we have to spend on lawyers and finance to execute deals. Awesome. Well, thank you, everybody. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or, a couple more. How big is it? Our sales team is 5 sellers right now. So we're still pretty small, right? And then in terms of enabling them, it wasn't that hard. Like I said, getting them into the Tackle system, like I think some of our sellers are better at creating private offers through there than I am now. There was, we had a period of a couple meetings where we coached them on how to talk about marketplace, both with the AMs at AWS and then with prospects and customers. why we do it that way, what are the benefits both for the customer and for us. So it's probably 2 to 3 enablement sessions. It wasn't a terribly heavy lift. I think a big benefit for us was we started that way, so there was never a process that we were transitioning from, and that made it easy, right? I was our first seller. I was selling through the marketplace. When we brought on our second and third, it was just, this is how Cloud Zero works. So we might have had a little bit of a head start there. I think I'm at time here. I don't want to get us behind schedule, but feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm based in the Boston area, but I'm back to traveling all over the country now. I'd love to meet some people, and happy to answer some more questions. Last one I'll answer, Megan. Because we're putting so much of our business marketplace, we generally don't set separate revenue targets for marketplace versus non-marketplace. I would say if I was making that decision, I would lean towards waiting a quarter or two. Just, things take a little while to build. And I would love to say you're going to come out of the gate and be able to be really successful. But I would hate for people to say, we didn't put deals through here in quarter one, so it's not a success, because, if your reps aren't pushing it from the beginning of the sales cycle, it can be challenging to switch midstream unless the customer really prefers it. All right. Thank you.